In today's video, we visit a place that gave working people a little bit of luxury, a little bit of comfort in a time when that was often not achievable. Hello and welcome to Through Lucy's Lens, videos where I go somewhere interesting and hopefully you will find them interesting too. Today's video, I didn't do an intro when I was there and I'm really annoyed about it because I've just finished editing this video, and sometimes you finish your edit and you really reflect on how special a place is. And when you're a historian or social historian and you're particularly interested in how people lived, what they did, what they ate, where they slept and how they kept clean, places like this are few and far between, and it's rare that I really lay on thick that I urge you to visit, but I really do. If you're in Belfast, take a visit to Templemore Baths because it was fantastic, absolutely brilliant. And there is a little bit of a story behind how I ended up going. When we arrived at George Best's house, the guides, I was chatting and as usual talking too much, and I mentioned that I'd seen a documentary on BBC iPlayer about a swimming baths, about a Victorian baths in Belfast, and how I would just love to visit. And they said, "Oh, we actually managed that too, let us arrange that for you." And within the hour we'd been picked up by the marvellous Davy who works at the baths and given our own guided tour, and honestly, memorable, special, marvellous. It was just one of those places that, you know, if you're really into social history, you do think about how did people keep clean. And here we have it. So please enjoy. As always, something a little bit different. I like to bring you different things about different places, not always about looking around houses, but hopefully you will find this just as interesting, because from the perspective of being a working class person, I recognise places like this from when I was a child. The excitement of the swimming baths, but before that they were almost a cathedral of cleanliness where people could keep themselves clean without having to use that tin bath or scrub at the sink after work. So enjoy. Right, I'm going to shut up, but I really did love this place. You know, I hope the enthusiasm runs through the whole video. Enjoy. Before I go though, thank you. 40,000 subscribers. What happened? Something that started as a hobby is now an obsession, and I'm so pleased that you're all here along for the ride. No one in the reign of pig's pudding would think that Lucy Scott would be putting herself out here like this on the internet, but here I am because I've got a community of people who share what I love, the history of real people. Anyway, from my back garden to, oh, the drain, lovely. See, we're keeping it here, we keep it real here on Through Lucy's Lens. From my back garden to your living rooms all over the world, enjoy this one because it's a very special place. See you at the end. Today we're in Belfast, visiting a building that tells a very human story about everyday life. The Templemore Baths. At first glance it looks like a Victorian public building. But places like this once played a vital role in working class life. They were built for washing, for health, for dignity, and perhaps most importantly, community. Today, the Heritage Centre at the Templemore Baths is managed by the East Side Partnership, who offer guided tours of this special place, and I was so excited to visit. Templemore Baths opened in 1897, during a period when Belfast was one of the fastest growing industrial cities in the world. Shipbuilding, linen manufacturing and heavy industry brought thousands of workers into the city. And many of these families lived in tightly packed terraced housing where indoor plumbing simply didn't exist. Most homes had no bathroom at all. Washing after a hard day at work often meant a tin bath in front of the fire or even out in the yard, water heated kettle by kettle, which was a slow and labour-intensive task that might only happen once a week, with usually daily washing taking place at a sink, just a quick spit and polish to get yourself as clean as you could. A whole family would be expected to share the same water. Dad first, ironically the most grubby of the lot, all the way down to the youngest. The baby might escape, having to wash in the sink instead. Public baths like this offered something transformative for the population. Access to hot water, privacy, and the chance for an ordinary working person to properly wash after a long day's labour. I've been fascinated by the idea of these public spaces for washing all of my life. My dad always talked about how during his own childhood in Birmingham, a visit to the public baths was the most wonderful experience. The luxury of those few inches of hot water and a bit of personal space stayed with him for life. Public baths like here at Templemore were carefully organised. When somebody arrived, they'd pay a small fee, often just a penny. The price of entry was deliberately kept affordable so working people could use the facilities regularly, usually once a week. Although there were facilities for women at the baths, it was mostly men using the facilities. And on a Friday night, there would be a queue down the road of bodies grimy from a week's hard labour, ready for a warm bath. One of the human features I love here is in the entrance lobby. The tiles are stained from thousands of cigarette butts being stubbed out on the tiles before entry to the baths. Each visitor would receive a small towel and a small sliver of carbolic soap. The sharp, medicinal smelling soap widely used at the time because of its antiseptic qualities. From there, they would be shown into a waiting room, and once space became available, they would be directed to one of the private bathing cubicles that line this corridor. There was a second-class bath and a first-class bath. But as you can imagine, the most widely used was the second class, and this is what is shown here. Inside each cubicle was what was known as a slipper bath, a deep enamel tub designed for soaking. But the bath didn't begin empty. An attendant would prepare your bath in advance, pouring in around 6 inches of near boiling hot water drawn directly from the huge boilers that powered the building. The bather then had access to as much cold water as they needed from the taps to bring it to a comfortable temperature. The second-class bathers only had access to cold water. But if you could afford a little bit more of a first-class bath, you had access to unlimited hot water. One Belfast resident later remembered their experience at Templemore like this. We'd go in with our penny and come out red as lobsters from the heat of it. It was the best wash you could get, better than anything at home. Many working families simply didn't have the facilities for a proper wash. A public bath like Templemore changed that completely. The chance to soak in hot water after a long day working in shipyards, mills or factories. It wasn't just about cleanliness, it was about comfort and dignity. Interestingly, in my many years as a teacher, when I asked my students about the Victorians and Edwardians, one of the presumptions they always made is that people in the past were dirty or somehow unhygienic. This really wasn't the case. The difficulty was not will, it was facilities and availability of places where you could become clean. Another Belfast resident remembered it this way. You could work all day in the yards and come in black with soot, but you'd leave the baths clean from head to toe. It made you feel human again. And yet there was a small irony in the system. Many bathers arrived wearing the only set of clothes that they owned. After bathing, it was quite common to simply put these same clothes back on. Clean bodies and worn work clothes existed side by side in working class life. But even so, the bath itself mattered enormously. The ritual of washing, the warmth of the water, the steam in the air. It was a small comfort that carried real meaning towards somebody's dignity.
Where'd you go? Can a man not get some privacy here?
I loved the human story of a real Belfast resident recreated here on his wedding morning. So I'll leave you to listen to this lovely piece, and thank you to the museum for allowing me to film it.
Step on that, dude. Today of all days. What's it called again? Carbol something? Oh, aye, carbolic soap. That's it. It's great stuff. Does the job in getting all the grease off. Even if it does sting these wee cuts on my hands. But no bother. It's just an occupational hazard, working down in the shipyard. You see, I've just finished the night shift, but I'll not sleep this morning. I've got too much to do. Anyways, I could do with a few extra bob, now that I'm getting hitched. We've been courting a while now, but today is the big day, as they say. It'll be soon enough, only a few hours, and I can't wait to see her. I hope I make Madame ma proud, and hers too. Wee towels they give you in here are no use. Hey, any chance of another towel? It's my wedding day, remember?
That's what they all say.
Dead on. Right. That's me nearly done. Now, I hope I don't work up a sweat walking to the church. It's alright when I'm finished my day in the yard, but not when I'm going to meet my sweetheart, and her looking beautiful. You know, I'm all nerves, but today is the happiest day of my life. Now, I'll drop these off with my folks on the way. My ma won't mind washing them. One last time.
As well as what I almost see as a temple, a cathedral of cleanliness, Templemore Baths was also a social space. While the bathing itself happened privately, the corridors, entrance halls and waiting areas created places where people met neighbours, shared news and caught up on the events of the day. Women used the baths as well, but often using designated hours or in a separate section. Templemore had a smaller section specifically for women. It wasn't smaller because they were women, but think about it. You're working full time, running a household, often with large families with children of multiple ages, cooking, cleaning. When would you get time to visit a public bath? Quite simply, many women never had that time. One Belfast woman remembered, however, it wasn't just the bath, it was the feeling of being looked after for half an hour. Behind the scenes, running a building like this required an enormous amount of work. One of the most important areas here was the laundry. Despite what visitors sometimes assume, it's not a public laundry where residents brought their own washing. Instead, it handled the bath's own constant mountain of linen. Hundreds of towels passed through here every day, along with communal swimming trunks used in the swimming pool. The towels were washed and pressed at high temperatures, so the reused items were spotlessly clean and sanitised. You can almost imagine the noise and steam of the constant cycle of washing. It must have been a great place to work in the winter to keep warm, but come the summer, I imagine it was an incredibly uncomfortable place to work. Staff worked continuously washing, drying and preparing fresh supplies so that every bather arriving here could be given a clean towel. And like any workplace, there's human stories too. Local memories suggest that if you worked here or knew someone who worked here, you might occasionally manage to sneak in a bit of your own washing through the system as well. Templemore Baths also created a space for leisure. By the late 19th century, the idea of leisure itself was beginning to change. Industrial workers were slowly gaining more structured working hours. Saturday afternoons off, for example, were becoming more common. And local authorities and city councils increasingly recognised the value of recreation for public health. Swimming pools became an important part of that shift. They offered affordable exercise, a place to cool off in the summer, and a place where you could learn a vital skill. You could learn to swim, and hundreds of thousands of children have learnt to swim in pools like this. Best of all, you didn't even have to afford to provide your own swimwear. Swimming trunks and bathing suits could be borrowed, quite the one-size-fits-all affair, and I did wonder how many ended up at the bottom of the pool after a dive. The good people of Belfast have quite the sense of humour though, so I can't imagine that ever would have been a massive issue other than a bit of a laugh. Templemore quickly became one of those places where thousands of local people first learned to swim. Schools would bring their pupils here for lessons. Swimming clubs trained here. Competitions were held, badges were earned, and races were won. For many Belfast children, this was their first experience of being in the water. Like many public baths across Britain and Ireland, the building eventually closed down as modern housing gained indoor bathrooms and the need for public washing facilities declined. Across the 20th century, hundreds of bathhouses disappeared, although many of the swimming baths attached survived. At the end of the tour here, you can still see the smaller swimming bath, now preserved beneath clear acrylic flooring. The pool itself remains exactly where it always was, and even details like the original spittoons and tiles survive. Small reminders of how people once used this space. It's great because there is another pool next door still, and you can still smell the strong smell of chlorine. Towards the end of the 19th and 20th century, bleaching powder, which was a mixture of chlorine gas and lime, was used to disinfect the water, especially after studies in the 1890s identified its potential to curb the spread of disease. Not as well controlled as it is in modern pools. Sometimes the water could be eye-stingingly strong, the smell clinging to your skin for days after your swim. There's still a larger pool in operation and has been since 1897, but of course I didn't film it because people were using it. And they've also built a new modern leisure centre extension to this space. And swimming remains as popular as a leisure activity as ever. But Templemore's story doesn't end here. What makes this place so special today is that it survived. And it survived because people cared about it. Local residents, community groups and historians recognised the importance of the building and worked hard to ensure it wasn't lost. Thanks to that community effort, the baths have been carefully restored and reopened as a heritage and community space. And we had the absolute pleasure of having a tour with Davey, a man so passionate about these baths, and his own father was part of that group that made sure that this space survived. Many people in Belfast still remember coming here within living memory. For some time it was their first experience of a proper hot bath, could be where they learnt to swim, or even where they met the love of their life. For others it was simply part of everyday life, a weekly routine and a meeting place, a small moment of comfort in an otherwise uncomfortable world. And that, to me as a social historian, is what makes places like Templemore Baths so powerful. Social history isn't about kings, politics or great events. It's about the ordinary experiences that shaped people's lives, the routines, the small comforts and the shared spaces that communities built together. Standing here, it was easy to imagine the sounds that once filled these rooms, footsteps on the tiled floors, children shouting, the rush of the water filling the baths, and the voices echoing along the corridor. This was a place of warmth, conversation and self-care in a time when self-care was not the norm for the working classes. Templemore Baths is a reminder that history isn't only written in grand buildings or famous events. Sometimes it's written in steam, soap, and the quiet dignity of everyday life. And I think it's very clear I loved it here, and I do urge you, if you're in Belfast, to visit. If you're new here, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's free and it really helps me to grow and keep doing what I love, bringing social history to everybody. If you've made it to the end of the video, you might be somebody who's been here for a while, and I just want to tell you a little bit about something new that I'm doing. On my travels, I've been picking up postcards, and yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a couple of comments every month to send somebody a handwritten postcard from somewhere that I've been on my visit. So look out, it might be you. I'll just say, hey, would you like a postcard? And I'll give you my email address and we can sort that out. So every comment, you could be a winner if you want a postcard from me, of course. I love writing. Anyway, until next week's video, I'll see you all soon. As always, thank you for your support. Lots of love and goodbye.